So we were waiting out, oh, hello. We were waiting out back, and I just said, I'm so impatient, and I need to get the conversation going, so I decided I needed to come out of here. So welcome, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us for the launch of The Moment Is Now, in dialogue with Changemakers. This series features prominent and emerging scholars, thinkers, artists, and practitioners across disciplines that bring about positive change in the world and connect with the New School's academic strengths and mission. There's a fan. With a focus on exploring and addressing current topics in art, politics, race, and culture, this series provides an opportunity for students, faculty, staff, and the general public to come together in community to engage with a rich range of perspectives and reimagine change. It is an honor to open this series tonight with our special guest, Danté Stewart. Danté is the author of the debut memoir, Shoutin in the Fire, an American Epistle, a stirring meditation on being Black and learning to love in a loveless anti-Black world. As you'll hear tonight, Danté uses his personal experiences as a vehicle to reclaim and reimagine spiritual virtues like rage, resilience, and remembrance, and explores how these virtues might function as a work of love against an unjust, unloving world. Danté's work as a writer and orator has appeared in The Atlantic, The New York Times, The Washington Post, Christianity Today, NPR, CNN, The Witness, a Black Christian collective, and more. This year, Danté was named one of 22 faith leaders to watch in 2022 by the Center for American Progress, and the Georgia Writer of the Year by the Georgia Writers Association. He got his BA in sociology, so I'm especially excited about that, from Clemson University, and is currently studying at the Chandler School of Theology at Emory University in Atlanta, Georgia. So I just want to say a couple of things about why Danté. So when I first read Shoutin in the Fire, an American Epistle, I knew I wanted to share a conversation with Danté, like right off the page. And for those of you who have read it or have at least begun to read any of his work, it's really clear how provocative and evocative he is. And so what's interesting in particular is how we first got to know each other, which was through Twitter, actually. And we just had an exchange in Twitter, and then we started chatting, and I just kind of impulsively said, would you be interested in coming to the New School? And he was like, are you kidding me? Some version of that, yes. And that he was a fan of the New School, he was a fan of President McBride, and was really excited, particularly to be the first of hopefully many speakers and guests in this space. So tonight we're going to start with a little conversation, followed by a reading by Danté, and then we'll close out the evening with a Q&A and a book signing, which will be over here. So before we get to the book signing, which I'm sure you're all excited about, please join me in welcoming Danté. All right.
All right.
So I got some questions for you.
Oh, let's go. I'm ready.
And I got them written down because I have to say that so far the conversations that we've had have been so wide-ranging and interesting. And just this morning, we had a conversation that went from Fanon to sociologists of various sorts to anger and rage and love and healing and all sorts of other things. And you were quoting left, right, and center. And actually, when I came back, I said to folks in the office, I'm amazed by your recall and how you just reference all sorts of different kinds of literary references, biblical references, other sort of theoretical perspectives. So it's quite amazing that you have that. So no pressure.
No pressure. Okay. No, I live for the moment. Hey, we're on the stage now. It might be a little too late, you know?
All right, so here we go. So throughout the book, you reflect
Yes.
on how your understanding of yourself changes over time with a lot of compassion and honesty and real candor that I think we all benefit from. So I'd love for you to talk a little bit about how your life has changed since writing your book and how that honesty and what you've shared has been received in your community, whether it's Atlanta or California or anywhere else.
Wow, that's a great question. I was asked by I actually was asked the version of this question from Professor Thomas today. He asked me like, "Yo, since the book came out, like what possibilities happen?" And so like, for me, I'm gonna try to be as honest as possible tonight as I possibly can. If I'm honest, I think this book showed me that there were so many areas in my life that I had not forgiven. There were so many things that so many places that I put myself in that I wrote about in the book. You know, there were so many areas of life that writing allowed me to explore that I don't think I actually honestly dealt with what the fallout, the emotional fallout would be of that. And I realized that when you write and you put things out in the world, people actually read them, you know? So it's people actually read your stuff.
Oh, yeah.
And then they actually talk about it,
Right.
and then they converse about it, and then you realize dang, I really talked about that? And things like that. But then also, I think it revealed to me deep areas in which the younger version of me that I carried with myself oftentimes was a kid who was unforgiven, who simply wanted a space where that kid could say I'm here, look at me, feel me, understand what I'm going through, and don't shame me because of who I am and what I am. I was actually talking to Robert the other day, Robert Jones Jr., shout out to Robert, the Prophets, let's go. I was talking to Robert the other day, and it was revealed to me that even now, I'm at one of the most insecure moments in my life. People look from the outside in yo, you're under the lights, and you played at Clemson, you went from this place where your town in the rural South Carolina was called the Corridor of Shame, and I realized that writing was not just a place I got free, writing was a place I went to be safe. And that there was no point in life where I actually wasn't consciously proving why I existed. But then I told you, as I was riding in my car a few weeks ago, I was reminded of a conversation I had with Wright Thompson, the writer, senior writer at ESPN, and he was holding up the book. We was together talking, he was holding up the book, and he started talking about me leaving Clemson and my story. And he held it up and he was like, "It worked out good for you, right?" And I couldn't even say yes. Because this book reminded me so much of how much shame I felt. But then I did something that I hadn't done in a long time. As I left that conversation, I turned on the audio version of my book and I listened to myself read to me. And I realized that at every moment of my life, there was no person who loved me more than I did. And this was a witness to what I discovered, is that if you are willing to face what others say you can't face, if you're willing to be courageous and do the hard thing, if you're willing to unloose your own self and find your own voice, you could surprise yourself and end up in New York, all the way from South Carolina.
So, I mean, one of the things that is so powerful, and also in what you just said, is about storytelling and narrative, right? And that in a way, what you're doing is in loving yourself and loving yourself through your writing is also showing how the power of authorship, right? And the power to claim your story, your family's story, community, the story of Black folks, and sort of pull that back in as an act of love, right? And it's also an act of courage, I think, which you talk about as well, the importance of having the courage to acknowledge and to call things out as you see them. So I'm just curious about why narrative is such an important sort of way to talk about things that are important to you, and how narrative is a way of actually expressing love for yourself.
Oh, 100%. So I'm of the belief that like story is the way we interact with the world. Like language is the way we shape the world. Like when we think about children, so I have 2 children, my son is here, and my daughter was screaming for me because she was just, I haven't been with my kids, I've been on the road, so they just want daddy, daddy, daddy. And so she's laughing, and I think, when I thought about my children being born, like the first thing they do is cry because they intuitively know that there will be somebody on the other side listening to them. And so like they make a sound because they know that their presence will be known. Right. And so like what that means is that like for so many of us, we enter the world wanting to make our voice heard. And at every stage of our life, whether you are on the football field or whether you in church, whether you in relationships or whether you in school or whatever, there are so many ways that voice is being silenced. And so often when that voice is silenced, like we crawl up and we do things to kind of make ourselves known, whether that's like destructively or whatever. We do everything to try and just simply have people feel that we are here. And so when people see like others who represent them, like, and their voices are free, then they maybe can be encouraged to realize that their narrative is not just meaningful, but their narrative is necessary. If you think about this country, right? Like the country wants to remind us of a story that is not ours. I am forced every day to believe a story about myself, whether it be through somebody being protected in ways that I'm not. Whether it's being in like critical race theory, whether it's in the context of critical race theory and people wanting to change curriculum. What they're simply trying to do is control the story because they understand that if one is able to see themselves in the world, then they actually can say something about the world that they exist in. And if I can say something about the world that I exist in, then maybe the sound of my voice can change it. So it's like returning to the first things, to the child who simply comes out of the womb, bursting forth with their voice and saying, I am here, you must love me. And so if you want to heal the world, you want to heal yourself, then we got to find a way to give the child in us the freedom to find their voice again. So narrative is not just powerful for us, it's powerful for the future that we want for our children. And what does it say about so many people in our country who only want to hear the screaming, laughing, yelling voice of children that look like them?
Right.
Why can't our children be free?
Right.
I think it was the quote, the health of a nation is dependent on the condition of its children. Narrative is necessary because our children don't just need to know the past and the present, but they need to be able to call forth the future and through their voice, bridge the gap between it.
Right. So I have to process that for a minute, but.
My bad, y'all. Y'all done got me started. I got my caffeine. Oh, we good. We good.
We know
good.
you like coffee.
We in the moment now. We here.
So one of the things that, in what you're saying too, is thinking about remembering and history and the fact that, we carry the weight of what others put on us, right? And we also carry the reality of what our histories actually are. And I was at an event where, in a conversation with some colleagues, and we were talking about how, and I think you actually talk about this in the book, about forgetting, right? And that forgetting is the luxury of the powerful. And and we don't have that same luxury, because if we don't remember our stories and our history, who will, right? And so I'm also really curious in all of that, if you could talk about how your family history and sort of the ways in which you really connected with like your grandparents, and there was all these sections where you talk about your you would sit down with your grandmother and you would have all these questions, like what you would say, but also what you really wanted to ask.
Oh, indeed.
Right? And then with your grandfather, and sort of the way in which dementia is steals that from you. So why is it sort of so important to what was it important for you to carry through and carry on and bring with you your family history in the way that you did?
No, that's an incredible question. I think in a very practical way, there are so many books that I read where Black elders are non-existent. It's as if like as Black people grow older, it's almost as if like they disappear that much more. And like, I wanted, to make sure that if I ever got an opportunity to write a book, I'm gonna shoot my shot, and like y'all gonna know my family. Where I come from in South Carolina, it's not just like, yo, I'm glad to write a book, I'm glad to show up. Like, I come from a people. And because I come from a people, that people should come with me everywhere I go. There was a moment, I'm gonna try not to get emotional with this. There was a moment in the book where my granddaddy, he was in the late stages of dementia, and he had got lost like 16 hours, 80-year-old, handsome, smart, sharp brother. And he got lost for hours, no medicine, no nothing. He's in these woods in South Carolina. And I'll never forget, I was in California. My mom calls me. She tells me that granddaddy is lost. We can't find him. And like, I got social anxiety. I just got anxiety disorder. So my anxiety ran from California back to South Carolina. I was in a rut, like my grandma would say. I was just in a rut. And they finally get to the moment where my mom was like, let's go back to the river. Let's go back to the river. They had searched the river, and where I'm from in South Carolina, on the Congaree River, where often the Confederate, they took that river because they knew that whatever was caught in the water would not be found and would be stuck there. See, the preacher about to come out of me real quick. They knew that whatever was in them, whatever got in that water would not be found and they would be stuck there. And so my mom says, let's go back to the river. Go back to the river. She calls me like, Danté, they've been praying, they've been this, they've been that. And I'm over in California stressing, the sun's shining, I'm all down and depressed. And then I go back to the river. So my mom goes back to the river and they say, Ruben. And my granddaddy says, yes. And they go silent and they yell out, we found him. So I get back to granddaddy. He gets out of the hospital, he's found. I come home and I talk to him. And I say, granddaddy, he's sitting beside me. I say, granddaddy, do you still got your dance moves? Because my granddaddy loved to dance. He loved James Brown. He actually drove for James Brown as a youngin' while he was on the road. So whatever he doesn't remember, I try in that moment to become a conduit of memory for him. I say, granddaddy, do you got your dance moves? And he rubs his head and he's like, I don't know, but I'm still here. And in that moment, I understood the history of Black people in this country, particularly Black elders, is a history of being in a world that wants to stick you in the ground and cover you in mud and drown you. But there are people who refuse to give up on you, who will call out your name. January of this year, my aunt dies. On the way home, I get a call, and it's my mama. And my mama's like, his breathing is going too fast. His breathing too fast right now. They don't know what they're gonna do with him. My granddaddy got left in the hospital, ended up contracting COVID. And through that hospital stay, somehow, I think it's called asphyxiation, you're choking on the stuff. And the day after my aunt dies, I wake up in the morning and I see a video of my granddaddy dancing once again on video. And it says, rest in peace. And he's dead. And I turn over to my wife and I tell her that granddaddy died. And I'm like, at least when people read the book, they're gonna know granddaddy. So I'm in tears. Like I lose it, they're gonna know granddaddy. But that's the reason why their stories are so important to me. Because Black elders in this country live and die without so many people believing they are interesting enough to chronicle. They're not just memorials or monuments or pictures on our shirt or images in our facilities and museums. They are people who deserve the best that any of us have to offer. And why not the people who can make sentences dance? Allow other people to experience a dancing granddaddy all over the page. That's why I do it. That's what it means to me. And I believe that we are not just our ancestors' wildest dreams. As I write in the book, we are their answered prayers. And they pray for us to be in these moments to tell something about what they invested in us.
Wow. Well, on that note, I'm going to ask you if you would read from your book for us for a bit.
All right, let's do it.
Yes.
I was going to go to the podium.
You can do whatever you want.
I think it, yeah. Is it better? I think it might be good to just sit down and read real quick.
Why don't you do that?
All right, I'm going to sit down and read. So I ain't going to tell you no lie. I was thinking about what to read to y'all tonight. Because I wanted to leave people with a reading of joy. Like we Black writers write so much about, I think we was talking about that today at breakfast. Like so many of us write about like the ways like we die and like the ways that like this country harms us. But for me, I am so concerned about the ways that we live. And I think right now that so many of us are grieving so much, we need to be reminded of the things that brought us here and makes us feel alive. So like, I don't normally do this, but I'm gonna read from the end of the book. Is that okay? Yes, sir. That's okay? All right, cool. I usually start at the beginning, or like there's a story with my grandma or my granddaddy, but like y'all done heard about them, so I'm gonna read the end of the book. George Floyd is dead. The country is burning. Everybody's struggling. The pandemic is happening. I'm sitting at my coffee table. My coffee is cold. And I just started to write what I see and what I want. In the weeks following the murder of George, I saw millions of people across the globe cry out publicly that they didn't want Black people to be forced anymore. No people should be forced to endure the way we endure. They didn't want us to be suffocated under the crushing weight of white supremacy. I saw scores of young people, fists held high in the sky, their lungs exhausted from all the screaming that they did. I saw scores of old people, some with canes, some in wheelchairs pushed by another, their lungs exhausted from all the screaming they did. I saw gay people and straight people, Muslim people and Christian people, American people and global people, rich people and poor people, all lungs exhausted from all the screaming they did. Then I wondered if this is the perpetual state of our human being, exhaustion. I saw creation, all of the creatures groaning under the fire. Signs were held high, reading like sermons on Sunday morning. Dirt marks kissed kneecaps as knees bent in prayer. Americans called to protect other Americans were now beating and spraying and tossing and turning and harming the Americans they so claimed to love. And the one word that touched my breath was this: exhaustion. As I scrolled through the photos from the summer's protests, my eyes beheld a baby girl on my computer screen, a beautiful black baby girl, her eyes piercing, full of fear, full of rage, full of love, full of exhaustion. Her mask set at her chin as she screamed from her belly, "No justice, no peace, no justice, no peace." Her hands are balled. She walks and she walks and she screams for herself and her future. Her hands wave back and forth, and she screams again. She has learned what we have learned. She has learned that her precious body is in danger, and so she must scream, and she must cry, and she must march. At that moment, I had become sad. I had become sad because I knew that no child should have to use her lungs to scream to live, or for those who look like her to breathe. I had become sad because it was a familiar story. I had become sad because I wanted to see her run and dance and play and grow up and get old and find love and find faith and find hope. I had become sad because I knew that she would never forget that moment. She would never forget that name, George, precious George. I had become sad because I knew that she, like me, and like all the folk who came before us, was in search of a better land, a land flowing with milk and honey that they could taste but could not find. Then I remembered. That was the hope. Her black body, caught between danger and deliverance. She chose to fight for herself. She chose to fight for her people. She chose to scream and to shout and to march and to dance and to throw her hands up and to preach good news and to remember and to shake foundations and rock souls straight and conjure up ancestral tongues and hot sweaty sermons and dark memories and dear pledges of her love and broken dreams and bent bodies and epistles of suffering and responsible love. She chose to stand in the face of danger, to hold on to some imagination of a better world. She chose to keep some memory of love alive. She became good news for us. It was no creed, no phrase, but love. The love of God at work in one small, beautiful black girl's body. She did not forget. She loved us. She loved us hard. It is a terrible thing that she has to love us this way. It is terrible that my children and your children have to love us this way. But if they had not loved us and we had not loved them, none of us would have survived. I looked again at the videos of millions of people marching in solidarity, and I saw so much more. I saw joy. I saw intimacy. I saw heaven smiling as love was cast on earth's threshing floor. I saw so much joy. It was not simply resistance. It was power. I saw good news. I saw a better story than the one we were offered. The beauty of this moment showed that suffering is not the total image. This is a moment of faith. I guess one would say flying. I see an unexpected glimpse of public bravery, their willingness to rise again. This joy is dancing with our humanity. I saw a complex and complicated relationship with hope, a tragic but necessary one if it is to become what it is to become, and that is beautiful. When I saw those images, I saw myself. I saw all the painful memories and tears that I cried that I wanted to be released from. I saw all the ways I had been hurt and all the ways I had suffered and all the ways I had failed. I saw all the ways I wanted better for us. I smelled the old metal mics and the old leather. I saw the back rows and the conversations and the laughing and the shouting and the shaking like something got a hold of your spirit and rocked you straight. I saw black boys in white fields and smiling like they're shining bright on a noonday. I saw late night prayer meetings, rough hands glistening with oil anointing our bodies and our futures. I saw our streaks marked with the streaks of our royalty, crowned with glory and honor. I saw bodies back straight again. I saw dreams that carried us. I saw prayers for mercy and pleas for help. I saw big cousins and friends playing cards and drinking liquor and laughing. I saw cops in silver cars reading protect to protect and serve, driving slowly through our neighborhoods, asking questions of us, looking at us and rarely smiling. I saw broke down cars on cinder blocks and dirt fields with deflated balls and trailers with spray paint and old brick houses with Bible verses meeting you at the door. I looked at us and I saw something that was so precious that made me feel so loved. I looked back and wondered that some of us were not here, but some of us were still standing. I looked at that precious black girl and I feel love, so love. I saw lies, I saw failure, I saw terror, I saw rage, I saw wounds, I saw love, I saw yearning, I saw floods, I saw dreaming, I saw America, I saw us, all of us, each one of us. We are alive, we are breathing, we are here, we are exhausted, but we catch. We are exhausted, but we catch our breath again. Now we can clap.
So I have a million. That was just incredible. And, we were talking to our colleague Mary before about the end, about closing, right? And how you move us through so many different phases, and the sort of moving into the interiority of how you experience certain things in the world, and then how it shapes your sense of hope, right? That you have that. And one of the things that I've just been I was so struck by in reading it was you had all of these things that were sort of commingling. So, the sort of anger and disappointment and frustration with what you experienced in these sort of white churches, right? And then sort of how that mapped onto what you were seeing happening in the world, and realization of who you are as a black man and as a black person, and what it means to be a black man in the United States of America at this moment in our history, and through all of it, the sense of love and hope and hopefulness was never abated. And I'd love if you could talk a little bit about that. Why is love so important? And is love a political thing as well as a personal thing?
I think love is so important because each one of us know just how important it is to have somebody outside of you waiting on you. I mean, what is love really, honestly, indeed, between people? Especially if we think about political love or a loving world. What is that but having somebody who is not you, caring for you and respecting you and waiting on you to greet you and embrace you? I think for so many people in our country, when we speak of like living in an unjust and unloving world, what we're really trying to say is that we live in a world where so many people have had backs turned on them. That we live in a world where so many people have been forgotten. Where like we live in a world where so many people have written their own stories, but because of the not marketability of those stories, that they don't get to soar in the world the way others do. And so I think love is so important for us because love keeps us noticing what this world oftentimes wants to erase. Like, every good writer is somebody who notices a thing and feels it deeply and gives it to another person to feel it as well. That's all good writing is the ability to notice the things of the world and interpret them and give it to somebody else. You can't really determine how they do, like what they do when they get it. You can't determine how they interpret it. You can't interpret how they like it or love it or are disgusted by it. But what you can do is at least give it to them in the best way you know how by doing as best you can to notice what is around us. I mean, that's one of the things about capitalism that's just so destructive is that it keeps us running and it almost makes it it almost makes it impossible to stop and notice. We produce so much on social media that we don't even notice so much of what we miss. So I was on a flight yesterday. No, yesterday, I don't know. Yesterday, y'all, this week has just been flying all over the place. But I was looking through my phone at a picture of Venice Beach. I was in LA, and on my way out, I stopped at Venice Beach, and I was like, you know what? I just want to go sit on the beach for a little bit. You know, something mundane, sitting on the beach. I just want to sit on the beach. I want to feel the breeze. I want to be still and be present, and I want to see what I noticed, and there was this couple that was holding hands beside me, and they walked beside me, and they stood under the horizon. It was 6 o'clock, and that LA sun at 6 o'clock is one of the most beautiful things ever. There's no more beautiful sight than sunset in California, you know. And they're under the sunset, this black couple, beautiful couple, and the one partner takes the phone and the other partner is posing and he is taking a picture of her, and I'm sitting and looking and watching them, and I'm like, what is love but another person trying to get the image right? Trying to make sure that nothing of your beauty is missed. That there are so many things that you do that make you beautiful. And I want to be outside of you and capture that beauty as best I can. Then I noticed a father and his son riding on a scooter. And the son is on the scooter in his lap, and the father stops, and the son runs in the playground, is just going in the playground, and his father's sitting there watching him play and watching him interact with other kids and things like that. And I just thought, what is love but allowing the things that we hold most precious to be free in and of themselves? Then, I'm leaving. And I've sat here and I've noticed things, and I walk toward the car that's coming to pick me up, and I think about it what is love but just being so thankful at the sheer grace of being alive when so many of us not here. And I think if this country is to be better, we can't just love as proximity to people. Like love has to be a powerful force where no human being in this society goes unnoticed. What a marvelous thing it is to like look at this world and just soak in how beautiful it is to be alive. And just imagine how that would be if that was the first response of so many people in this world. I guess that's why Stevie Wonder got that great album, Songs in the Key of Life, that this world just need a little bit more love. I guess that's why we got to lean on the artists and the musicians and the activists and the people from below, because when the world is not loving, there are always people creating spaces of love, and at some point, it's going to touch the world and make it better.
So I want to take that a little further, and thinking about the people that you reference in the book, you've got incredible thinkers and theologians, and as I'm listening to you now, it made me really think about Bell Hooks.
Oh yeah.
And the way that Bell Hooks talks about love. So how will she continue to shape the way you think about questions like that? Because her approach to love is not mundane, it's radical.
It is.
Right? And it's about liberation. And I think people, some folks, when they read her work or others, and the way that they invoke love, misunderstand what she's actually saying. So how has her work, or maybe other people's work, really informed your thinking about notions like that?
I think for me, there's a moment in I think it's in All About Love, it might be in Salvation, where she says like shame makes self-love impossible. Like shame makes self-love impossible. And then there's a moment in We Real Cool where she says, wounded black men can heal. And then there's a moment in All About Love where she starts to talk about children and like how the society like robs children of love. And I feel like when I read, at least in my reading of Bell Hooks, like love is always an embodied practice that rids each one of us of rejection and shame. And so I think for me, when I write and I think about Bell Hooks, because like when I wrote the chapter on Black masculinity, the chapter Womb, it was like absolutely one of the hardest chapters I could write, because I talked about a very traumatic event that shaped me even to this day and that I still hold. But like, when I was reading Bell Hooks, particularly reading We Real Cool, and I read that line, wounded black men can heal, like, I realized that like whenever she wrote that, I forgot what year it came out, but like whenever that thing was written, it was almost like that end of a Song of Solomon, where you hear the echo at the end, love, love, love. And it's like at that moment in Song of Solomon, like when you think about echoes, even though that echo, that voice was shouted in that moment, when the people hear, or when whoever hears it at every moment of that echo, it's as if they heard it for the first time. And I feel like Bell Hooks' work was like that for me, that when she wrote Wounded Black Men Can Heal, I realized that like whatever shame and regret and self-sabotage that I had, and unforgiveness, that it is okay and I can be free of it. And like, I feel like so many people, when they talk about love, it's like just being like nice to people. It's just simply like affirming a person so you can look better to the world. Right. Being around them, having them represented so that somebody may look at you and praise you for how great you are. And I I just think for bell hooks, if love does not alter the way we relate to ourselves and relate to others and relate to the world, it's not love, it's hate. Because what is hate? I think as Elie Wiesel said, the opposite of love is not hate, but the opposite of love is indifference.
Right.
And so if we're gonna love, then we cannot be indifferent to who we are, to what we face, to what we have inherited, and what we want.
Which means that love requires that you see the other person,
Indeed.
right? Or the community.
Indeed.
Because in order for it to not be what you just described, you have to see either the sum total or the totality or the possibility.
Indeed.
Right? And so in a way, when you think about white supremacy and you think about these sort of systems of injustice that fundamentally are built on erasure, right, and dehumanization, it shows you how much work there is to do to get to the space where love is a real possibility, right?
Yeah, because when I think about white supremacy, as much as like white supremacy is this like super structured, this kind of historical like reality, like white supremacy is a condition of the soul. It is a soul that like it is the condition of a soul that has almost never experienced what it means to be loved. Like I know like it's not like, I know people don't like talking about it like that, and like even me saying this, it might feel a little bit weird to me saying this, but like I gotta acknowledge that Baldwin was right. As much as I read Baldwin and want to disagree with him, we will force our brothers to deal with themselves, he says in The Fire Next Time, to deal with themselves as they are, to look at themselves and realize that you don't even know what love even feels like. So because you don't even know what love even feels like, the only way you can relate to me and yourself is violence. Somebody else must be dead or harmed in order for you to be free. And what does it say about your soul that I have to disappear for you to feel like love can be a possibility? So whiteness is as much a disordered love as it is a disordered society.
So it just makes me think about when we were talking earlier about Fanon and what he had to say about all of this.
Yes.
And so I'm wondering as well, in terms of another person whose work influenced you and whose work you're troubling with, right? And some of your thinking, sort of how does Fanon also inform the way that you're thinking about these same kind of notions about whiteness and violence, right? And the sort of denial of others' existence.
Yeah, we were speaking about this morning, and it really blessed me. It really brought up something that like I was thinking about. Like I really love Fanon, and Fanon makes me, he really makes me question so much about like the world. There's a quote in The Wretched of the Earth that is just like absolutely fantastic for my work in religion and theology, where he says that like the church of the colony was not Christ Church, but it was the church of the white man, and they didn't want me to be Christian, but I'm loosely quoting this quote, but they wanted me to be white. They wanted me to have the white faith. And so liberation for him was not just liberation in like your mind, psychological liberation, but it was also liberation from the conditions that want to convert you into something you never should have been in the first place. And so Fanon excites me when I get to those moments where like, where I feel like just so angry at the world and I need language to like fight somebody and tell them off. And like, if you want to tell somebody off, read Fanon, you want to make somebody feel bad about this country, go read Fanon, whatnot. But then like, there is something that excites me about Fanon, particularly about a man who loved the question, who he never forgot the power of the question. And this like beginning of Fanon in The Wretched of the Earth begins with, like, we were talking about this pessimism of, like, society. But then there's, like, the end of Fanon, like black skin and white mask. And at the end of Black Skin and White Mask, you meet Fanon, almost the preacher, or the Fanon the prayer. Like Fanon who goes into, like, this moment of, like, worship of being a human being and being alive. But then you meet a sad Fanon who has, as Baldwin would say, despaired of the world. And his desire to make the world better has driven him mad. And I wonder, as I do my work, is the type of work that I'm doing gonna take me from a moment of peace and praise and drive me to madness? I don't want that for us. It is all well and good to talk so much about, like, the evils of the world and, like, the stuff that's just so gritty. We need to if we're gonna imagine better. But, like, I want us to actually make it there and be whole. And, like, I want, like, the life of the mind to be something that keeps us being alive. We spoke of that moment of that conversation between Baldwin and Maya Angelou, where Dr. Angelou is talking about Baldwin about leaving home and escaping, like, the world that he came from. And Baldwin, I think she asked him about missing home or something to the effect of home, and he talks about running and realizing that, like, if he would have stayed home, he would not have survived. But then he said something that really challenged me and blessed me. He also said that if you're always resenting the world and resisting, then you can't write a word. You can't write a sentence. You can't write a book. And so as I, like, mess with, like, Fanon and think about, like, the life of the mind and changes his world, I want to change the world, but I don't want to destroy myself in the process. I want to be there to enjoy the future with y'all. You know, and I think that each one of us, based on, like, how hard this life is for us and how much grief we hold, we deserve to survive whatever this thing is called America. We deserve to survive it.
I could just be up here talking to you for hours.
Yeah.
And however, I'm actually going to share and open it up for questions. And I have one more question I'm going to ask before we wrap up. But anyone who has a question, we have mics at the front. So if you wouldn't mind going up to the mic, briefly identifying yourself and asking your question.
Good evening. I am Robert Jones Jr., Danté's big brother. Danté, you depart from Martin Luther King Jr., who said, "I may not make it to the mountaintop with you." Why do you feel like you deserve also to make it to the mountaintop?
Because I feel like so many of us don't. And, like, there's so many of us in this life who grow old but never grow up. Who experience a lot of things but experience nothing. Who become so successful but so corroded. Who experience so much trauma but don't know 1 second of what it means to live life at ease. And, like, when I look at our history, I just look at so much that this country has, like, robbed us of. Like, I was listening to Kiese, I think he was talking to somebody, he was talking to a sister, and he was like, what does reparations mean to you? And she says, the death of our own choosing. The death of our own choosing. And I think there's some power in that. There's some power in the death of our own choosing. That I want to live the life that I want to live for myself. and I want to die the way I should die for me. However long I have on this earth, that should not be robbed of us. And so, like, yeah, I want to make it to the mountaintop because so many haven't. Millions made it across the land. Millions are still buried in the sea. But there are still millions still here who can stand on the mountaintop declaring that we are free. I believe that in my belly, and I want to keep believing it. Thank you.
Yes.
Hi, my name is Camila Tibbetts. I'm a student at the New School. I wanted to thank you for writing this book for all of us, but particularly for those of us that have chosen to stay and build the kingdom in spite of the trauma that we've experienced in white churches. And you mentioned earlier one of my favorite sentences from the book where you did say, we are not simply our ancestors' wildest dreams, we are their answered prayers. But the follow-up sentence was, we are the leaders that they prayed for. And I think about William Seymour, you know, when he was in Bible school and he just had a passion and had to sit outside Bible school and listen because he wasn't allowed in because he was a black man. And how he went on to have one of the greatest revivals in American church history, the Azusa Revival. And I held on to his legacy when I experienced racial trauma in the church. You know, I held on to what he experienced to continue to build the kingdom. So my question to you is, how do we continue today to be the leaders that our ancestors prayed for? How do we continue to walk out those prophetic words that our grandmothers and elders spoke over us and laid hands on us? How do we do that today?
Wow. Whew. Whew, I'm about to clap for you. That's a good question. like, for real. Woo. Thank you so much. That is a very, very important question. And I too am a fan of William Seymour. I'm Pentecostal to the bone of me, and it comes up in my speaking and my writing and all of that. And so I think we become those leaders, especially if you think about the words. I think we become those leaders by actually capturing those words and reminding ourselves of it. So I think some of us need to go back to those words that like our grandparents said to us and write them down on a notepad and put them in a place where you can remember and hear, like at the end of Toni Morrison's Song of Solomon, the echo of their voice as if it's been experienced the first time. We have to remind ourselves of those words. We got to remind ourselves like of the power of language. Just think about like meditation. I am fine in this moment. Inhale, I am okay. When I came up here, I was so nervous. I told myself, self, you gonna be okay. Me and Danté had a little moment back there. And I'm saying, hey, it's time to show up. And for you, every time we look at those words and remember those words, we remind ourselves that it is time to show up in this world. It is okay to not feel okay today, but there is somebody who has put a word inside of me, who has done things that I need to be reminded of, that I need to honor what they have done for me by being reminded of those words and actually acting on it. What good is it to read James Baldwin and we do not do nothing about it? What good is it to read Audre Lorde and not do nothing about it? What good is it to read Bell Hooks and we not become more loving? What good is it for grandma to say something to us or granddaddy to say something to us and we do nothing about it? So I think firstly, we become those leaders by capturing those words and reminding us of it. But I think we also become those leaders by being vulnerable and courageous enough to say something about what's happening in this world today. It's a lot of people speaking in this world, but it's not, in some sense, I'm not going to say it's not, but we need more people who are willing to speak in ways that actually change the world. It's one thing to say that something is wrong. It's another thing to actually say, this is why it is wrong, this is how it is wrong, and this is how we fixed it. And I'm going to keep screaming about it until you listen to me. And if you don't listen to me, I'm going to go to somebody else. And if they don't listen to me, I'm going to go to somebody else. Why? Because the way that I am here today is because somebody kept speaking about their condition. And that is how I lead. And also, how we lead is we got to give up this fight. That's the best way to say it. Y'all, we got to give up this fighting in a sense of we got to give up the idea that if I don't fight to get it, I won't ever have it. Our ancestors done lived on so much fragile ground. And we owe it to ourselves to not just keep struggling and fighting against this thing. We owe it to ourselves to take vacations. You owe it to yourself to get off social media. You owe it to yourself to buy you some golden goose. You owe it to yourself to be wearing some leather pants. You owe it to yourself. You owe it to yourself to ball out. You owe it to yourself. You owe yourself everything somebody told you you could not have at some point in your life. That's how we lead. We give ourselves what we did not have in the past, and you get to determine that. So write it out. What is something I was not able to get that I deserve to get right now? And you find a way, 3 ways, just 3 simple ways to give that to yourself. And you practice it. And like my coach would tell me when I was playing football, it doesn't get easier. The game is still the game. But the good part about the game is this: if you do it long enough, you just get better. And you'll be the leader that they pray for. I promise you.
Question? Yes.
This is wonderful. Thank you so much. I'd like to ask you about the importance, because I know it comes up in the book, of dream breaking and disenthralling oneself from illusion.
Hey, I got to give it up to Ta-Nehisi for that one. I read Between the World and Me, and so, that kind of did it for me. It was me, it was reading Between the World and Me when Ta-Nehisi used that language of dream killers. And it did something to me because, there is a way to think about killing dreams that's terrible. You don't want to kill the dream of somebody who oftentimes their dreams been killed in so many different ways. But there is dreams that need to be killed in a sense that are lies almost. They're illusion of progress in this country. I feel like we need to redefine that dream. And killing dreams, what I mean by killing dreams is not destroying them. It is about redefining them. And I think if we can redefine the terms of our existence, then we can dislodge ourselves from the illusions that we have inherited from a past that was not ours. Because whether we believe it or not, there's this moment in Ted Chiang. Anybody the movie Arrival? Anybody seen that movie Arrival? Oh, it's an absolutely phenomenal movie. If you haven't, it's just amazing. It's based on a short story that Ted Chiang wrote in Stories of Your Life. But he wrote another collection of short stories entitled Exhalation. And he has this quote that says, "The past and the future are the same. They cannot be changed, but they can only be understood more fully." And so when you think about unjust dreaming that needs to be killed is the dreams that force us to not decipher the past, to understand the past, and that wants to force us into a future that does not deal with the past. Just dreaming is something that takes the future and brings it to the present, acknowledging the past and trying to redefine what we mean by everything. It gives us the power To be the type of people who can say, I'm not the only one who gets to define what the dream is. I don't get to be the only one who gets to define the terms of our existence. So as a Christian, I'm not trying to create a Christian nation. I'm trying to be somebody who's meaningfully Christian, trying to live in a more just and loving country. As a straight black man, I'm not the only one trying to define the terms of liberation. Those who are trans and non-binary, those who are women, those who are queer, they get to define those terms as well, because we're trying to create a collective world where we all thrive. How can we thrive in a collective world if only one person gets to dream and get to define the terms of the dream? And so that redefinition is also about reprioritizing whose voice gets to be heard. And so for me, to be a dream killer is somebody who does not, in some sense, give up on the possibility of dreaming, but they get to redefine what it actually means for us. And they actually try to create space to listen to the voice of other people so that we can dream better than we ever have. Yeah.
Any other questions? Yes. Yes.
Oh, I'm nervous now. Oh, my. President McBride, come on. Be light on me. Be light on me, brother. Be light on me.
No,
let me get another swig of water real quick now.
First of all, I appreciate you being here as a fellow son of South Carolina.
Let's go.
And I'm just so appreciate what you do, what you brought into the world. And I'm with you in terms of how you think about and talk about and really rest in this place of hope, right? And not a gospel of, I won't call it a gospel of abundance, but a gospel of joy, right? Where it's not okay to just to constantly be in a state of struggle. But I also, as a witness of history, am frustrated by the generations, and I see it continuing. And at some level, I could argue your book is another instantiation of that, right? That the generations of Black talent, energy, passion that has been spent and continues to be exerted, right, in the fundamental defense of our humanity.
Exactly.
It's exhausting,
It is.
right? It's discouraging, it's demeaning, it's demoralizing. And I don't care where you are in the food chain. I say that as president of a university, right? I don't care where you are in the food chain, right? That abundance, that joy that you reference is always undercut, right? By our positionality in a world that continues to be a white supremacist world. So it's a question I wrestle with I have to get to that place myself. I have some methods that I use, but how do you maintain that sense of joy, right? That sense of, I'm not just going to exist in struggle, right? I actually deserve, right, some joy in this world. How do you rest in that place?
Yes. Whew, I can go so many different places, but let me start here. I think joy is a community project. Like, joy is an expressive friendship. And like when I told Mateo and Robert I was coming up here, they showed up. They were waiting on me to be here. And I was waiting on them. And we talk week in and week out about our work and about our lives and about what we like and what we love and what we're experiencing. And I realized that, like, dang, we haven't even been talking about how we suffer. We just simply existing ordinarily together. So I think the first place for me that I tap into joy is like in my friendships, in in my relationships, like with my family, with my children. Like I want my family with me, wherever they possibly can be, because like there's nothing that brings me more joy than when my son comes to my office and he says, "Daddy, I want to be a writer." You know, and he's like, my son is 4, but he's like, Lord, he could have this mic and he'd just be like talking your head off or whatnot. He actually can recognize James Baldwin. He knows who James Baldwin is, so I'm winning as a parent. But like when he interrupts my work, he's like, "Daddy, I want to be a writer." He don't want to be a writer. He want to go to YouTube Kids. You know, he says, "Daddy, I want to be a writer." But there's nothing that brings me more joy than my son seeing something in me that he desires. You know, you think about so many black boys in this country. How many of us are given the gift of desiring what our Father has? There can be some legit healing in being given the freedom to desire what our Father has. There can be something healing in that. There's nothing that gives me more joy than like reading Kevin Quashie or something, and like reading about like blackness and black aliveness, and like listening to like Kendrick Lamar or listening to Big Frida talk about gospel and the influence of gospel on their music, and how like when they do that New Orleans joint, it's like a revival, and like all that, like there's something about that ethos that like bring me joy. Like there's also like, you know, like I work out a lot, and so like I need them endorphins and serotonin. You know, psychologically, I need my body brain chemicals to be firing. So like there's nothing more joyful than like doing what takes care of my body, you know, and then like just doing the stuff I love. Like there are moments where I force myself to like just like write whatever I feel. I mean, it might be like poetry. It might be like a short story. It might be something nonfiction, but it's something that I did that I didn't want to run and give somebody else. I did it because I love it. And so like, I guess when I think about it, I guess my whole life is evidence of joy. Because I have the evidence of how I practice and how I live. And I like how it feels. And I think over the last year, I've been more conscious of it, because I know that like, I don't want people to be around me and see me as like a callous, angry person. Because this world does something to you. Like you read Baldwin, he was mad. Like it did something to him. Like it did something to him. That brother did. It's a reason why that brother got up out of here now. You know, there's a reason why he got up out of here, and why all the other ones left. You know, and why they fled, and why the Great Migration happened. There's a reason why those things are like black fugitivity. There's a reason why that thing is actually a term, because we're trying to escape to like a place where we can just exist in joy, and be normal, and be free. And so like for me, how I maintain that joy, I just try and be like a cool dude who just like I was gonna say something just now and that's gonna get me in trouble. I was gonna say something that's getting me in trouble. I was gonna be South Carolina just now, like me and my boys talk. I just wanna be a real dude, you know, a real dude that's just a great dude to hang around. Some of y'all know where I was going, you know. You know, I just wanna be a real dude that's just a great presence to be around. That like, you know, when people leave, they're like, yo, that dude loves life. There's a story in the Gospels, I'll leave you with this, where like Jesus is at a party and he turns water into wine at a wedding. And like that story is recorded in the Christian scriptures. And like, yeah, the miracle is cool. It's amazing that you can turn like water into wine. You know, it's cool. But the thing I like most about that story was that Jesus was a person that people actually liked being around. That's joy. Being the type of person that people actually like being around. So if I can be like that every day, then I can find some joy in this life. And he brought the wine to the party.
So I have to say, I cannot wait to see where your work heads. Yeah. And I know you've got a big vision for what's to come, and you're in the midst, right, of working on your next book right now. Mm-hmm. And so before we close, do you want to share a little bit about what you're working on and where your work is going? Yeah.
So right now, so Bell Hooks has that trilogy, love songs to the nation. So I kind of want to be like Bell Hooks, I mean, I want to write a trilogy, so, I want to write the trilogy. I want to do that. So like right now I'm working on this next project on grief. The working title in my heart right now is like Every Day in Heartbreak, How Grief Can Change the World. And there's something about like, a lot of us are grieving, and all the books that I've read on grief oftentimes deal with grief associated with death. And I'm trying to wonder, like, about the grief associated with life. What do we learn about having to grieve the self that you're not, that others remember? How do you learn how to grieve the self that's not forgiven? Like, what about unjust grief, and how is white supremacy an experiment in unjust grief? And what about, like, grief in the natural world, and what can you learn from the ways animals grieve the things of this earth, and how we are so terrible at grieving something that should be seen as precious? So like, I'm working on a book on grief or whatnot. And then the last installment, hopefully, Lord willing, I really legit want to write a book on joy. So I've given people language for liberation and Shoutin in the Fire. The next book I want to give people language for grief. Then the last book I want to give people language for joy. And then I want to go into like screenwriting, YA. I want to do everything. I want to write poetry. I want to go down as one of the best American writers ever to exist on this land. And I'm determined to do it.
Well, I'm excited to be on a little bit on the path with you and see where your work heads. And I'm truly grateful for you being here tonight. And I just want to close by, first thanking our incredible interpreters and everybody who made this event possible. I really have to thank Marcine in particular, Marcine Miller, yes I do, for just being a stalwart part of this work, and the rest of the folks in the Provost office, like Dan, I think Dan's here somewhere, and Heather. But I am just so grateful to you for bringing your vision, your story, and your voice here to the New School, and for all that you have left us to really think about. And thanks to all of you for being here with us as well. So we're going to have a book signing, and as you see at the front of the stage, and where you can purchase copies of Shoutin in the Fire. I know you all want it if you don't have it yet. And so I just want to let you know what's coming next in the series. So the series is going to continue next semester with the executive director of the American Library Association, Tracy D. Hall, who will receive the 2022 Literarian Award for Outstanding Service to the American literary community from the National Book Foundation. So I look forward to continuing this conversation with all of you in the coming months. And please let folks know that this is going to be a hard act to follow, right? Hard act to follow. And but I am certainly looking forward to how we take from what you've left with us and think it through and how it gives us meaning in the work that we're all doing, and how it carry it forward into future conversations. So thank you again so much. Thanks to all of you, and have a great night.